Hello, everybody. So it's that time again. We are coming up on a full moon in the sign of Scorpio that will be happening on Friday, May 1st. And I thought I would take this opportunity to consult the cards and get some insight into how we might navigate these deep waters of lots of archetypal energy that's been flying around. There's been a lot going on in the sky and out in the world that is corresponding to some pretty big changes, major upheaval, maybe even the disintegration of certain aspects of our society. I think it would be reasonable to say that. So, as always, I'm going to ask for insider guidance around what would be most helpful for us to know, understand, or do in regards to current conditions and how we can orient ourselves in the world so that we make skillful choices around how to handle some of these things that feel big and overwhelming. So I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to go silent. I'm going to concentrate while I shuffle. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Erin Smith. I have a long-standing tarot business by the name of Vardo Tarot. I've been doing this reading professionally since around 2011. And more recently, I got my master's degree in counseling psychology from Pacifica Graduate Institute, which is a Jungian oriented program. So I'm also an associate marriage and family therapist. And psychology often enters into my interpretation of the cards. So I hope you will find this helpful. I am gonna go silent and concentrate while I shuffle. Okay, I'm just gonna say a prayer over these cards. So I guess what I'm seeing here is, so first of all, there's a lot of wand energy that's coming up here. And it appears to be sort of making a progression or giving us some sense of how we might best move through the chaos, right? Wands represent life force energy. So it tends to be the kind of energy that we direct towards action out in the world. So it's a kind of internal motivation. It can feel like a fire in your belly. It can, if we were to correspond it to a planetary archetype, it would be, uh, very much associated with Mars energy. When we are passionate about something and compelled to take an action out of that passion, this is very much wand energy. And the Five of Wands is sort of like being pulled in multiple directions at once, having a lot of kind of chaos that you are needing to navigate. And it can often play out or present in the world as conflict. If you are setting an intention to move towards something or, an objective of some kind, you might meet with resistance from other people who have alternative ideas or plans. And so this is an interesting card to come up in correspondence with the Five of Wands. Here we have the Seven of Wands. And the way that I usually describe the Seven of Wands is it's indicative of having overcome some significant obstacles as a result of being like a warrior. It is a kind of acquired resiliency as a result of having, met with conflict in one's own life. And this ability to sort of fight back and to assert your will in the face of some of that like restrictive, combative energy. And, to be fair, a certain amount of this warrior energy is really powerful and important, right? It's how we defend ourselves against predators. It is necessary. It's sort of it's the exact opposite of learned helplessness. It is taking the initiative to overcome those obstacles so that you have some kind of volition in the world. But in the face of a lot of conflict, it's easy to get stuck in this way of interfacing with the world where we're always poised for battle. This kind of hyper vigilance where we're ready to fight at a moment's notice. And that may not always be the most skillful way to meet with adversity. I mean, again, it's like it sort of depends on the circumstances, right? But we should not let ourselves immediately launch into battle mode when it may be more advantageous for us to work from a cooperative model, right? How can I align with others who are like-minded or on my side in order to meet these challenges in a way that is it almost transforms the energy and it allows us to find resourcing, whereas before we were just in opposition, right? So the Seven of Wands is saying there's no one left to fight, that we've overcome certain obstacles in order to get to this place in life where we can navigate more skillfully in a more intentional way. What actions are we choosing to intentionally address adversity? rather than just being reactionary to it. And and so what the Seven of Wands is saying is, again, how can we align with others who are wanting to accomplish the same kind of goals that we are and come into an agreement about how that we're going to do that? We're likely to have success in this way by approaching things from the perspective of like cooperation rather than reactionary um, uh, battling. So the Six of Wands is the victory card, overcoming obstacles, being celebrated for our accomplishments, being able to have affect real change in regards to whatever it is that we are trying to shift towards, again, resourcing. A lot of what's coming up here is how do we take action out in the world and move forward in a way that is allowing us to step into greater resourcing. And I think in a kind of more universal way, you know? So not just individually, but collectively. And that's really like coming up here. Again, this idea of the lovers is an interesting card because it is a kind of representation of what we are hoping to achieve internally so that we are able then to create that state of balance out in the world in all our relationships with others. And the lovers is about unity and wholeness, and it starts from within. That we are moving towards a state, or, you know, ideally moving towards a state where our masculine and feminine energies are in balance with one another. And, you know, it seems rather important to acknowledge that this is not about gender, you know, that these ideas that were instilled in the tarot. I mean, scholars, you know, there's been, you know, copious discussion of, you know, over the centuries about, you know, the meaning of the cards and where this information comes from. But many scholars are in agreement that a lot of the philosophical ideas that have been impregnated in the imagery of the tarot have their roots in Neoplatonism. And there is this sort of these Platonic ideals of what masculine and feminine energy are like, and especially this idea that they are opposites but corresponding with one another. They create this state of balance. If you know, if you're a come from a more Buddhist perspective or a Taoist perspective, it's like yin and yang. They are seemingly opposing forces, but they're in actuality aspects of the same holistic system. So masculine energy, like wand energy, asserts itself externally in the world. It is taking this action in order to create something in the world materially. Feminine energy is more receptive. It is about stillness, receiving insight or guidance, being able to sit with an impression and allow that impression to germinate and grow in our imagination as a way of guiding our action out in the world. And remember, one without the other is impotent. So if you're only operating out of one or the other of these ways of being, then you're likely going to confront with you're going to come in contact with some obstacles, right? So if you're all drive and assertive will and trying to impose your will on everyone else without any kind of meditative mindful analysis of why or what your motivation actually is and what you hope to accomplish, you are likely to spin your wheels. You are likely to kick up a lot of dust. But if you're all passive and reflective and, you know, tuning in so intently to receiving insight and never actually taking any action out in the world, then that energy can lead to stagnancy. So you can see why these energies are complementary rather than oppositional. They support one another when used appropriately and when you are in a state of awareness about where you might be out of balance, right? Like, which is it for you? Because of course it's going to look different for every single person. um, some people are passive. They have a hard time finding their voice. They have a hard time asserting themselves in situations where others feel more dominant. They recede into the background. They feel more comfortable in internal practices. Um, and then other people again are like kind of like in trying to dominate everyone and everything. And so it takes some self-reflection to notice, like, I am leaning heavily on this one way of being out in the world, and it might be beneficial for me to bring in some of that equal and opposite energy. And so, again, this idea that if I can achieve this kind of balanced state within myself, I am just a lot more likely to create that kind of beautiful, balanced, symbiotic relationship to people and situations out in the world. The lovers in relationships looks like an equal exchange of giving and receiving. And so you can see how that kind of energy would be really profoundly nurturing, where, in partnerships, all the energy or all the responsibility isn't falling on one party to make everything happen, where each party feels like they're appreciated for what they're bringing to the table. This kind of beautiful responsiveness that comes from being able to find that balance within ourselves. So, and then again, like once we are kind of in line with that, then it's much easier for us to think about how we can create systems that meet everyone's needs in just an abundant way. Like many people think or associate pentacles with money. I mean, for obvious reasons, they look like coins. But really, this is like they're in alignment, or they correspond to, they're earth-based. They're a material representation of wealth and well-being. And of course, wealth isn't always just associated with money. It's really, about having enough food, having enough sunlight to grow the food, having enough water to water the crops, having enough resources to build our houses and to maintain a healthy environment, having enough clean air to fill our lungs and, provide an enriched, vital, system within our bodies. Like this is really, and of course, aces are just the highest octave of this energy. It's like a gift from God. Uh, and the implication here is that it's infinite and abundant. And if, again, we're just more likely to be able to align with the resources in the world and realize that this sort of capitalist notion of like planned obsolescence or, creating insecurity in order to make people consume. This is the exact opposite of the energy of the Ace of Pentacles. The Ace of Pentacles is abundant and freely given resources. And we're just more likely to recognize that in our lives and want to create systems that foster this perspective if we are in balance, in cooperation with others. And, so this idea too of how can we think clearly and communicate clearly to others in regards to how we wish to achieve this out in the world. That's very much the Queen of Swords. The Queen of Swords is one who has learned to wield her sword wisely. And swords relate to the mind, thoughts, ideas, and communication. And queens in particular, queens and kings represent this kind of state of maturity, having advanced in one's life to a degree that you have a certain level of authority over the way that you conduct yourself in the world, that you have achieved a certain kind of stature as a result of living in the world, having real world experience. And in this case, it is recognizing that not everything your head tells you is helpful or true. It's being able to practice discernment with your thoughts in order to communicate clearly, concisely, and kindly, which is by far the most efficient way to interact with people. I mean, you know, language is a kind of technology that was created so that we can understand what the other person is thinking and feeling, what their experience is. And so this idea of being forthright, being honest, being direct, being clear and concise, this is part of like how we are being called to respond to the world at this moment, you know? Um, Again, we are more likely to find support amongst our fellows when we're able to communicate in a clear and non-combative way. Um, these two are interesting. So, the emperor is emblematic of the archetypal father. And, just like with all the cards, there's a kind of upside and a shadow side to these archetypes. Like when they're expressed in their, ideal form, the father is one who protects, one um, who takes responsibility for their creations. I mean, really, let's think about it. Like, a good father is invests their time and energy into making sure that their progeny is safe, that they have the right conditions present to grow up strong and eventually step into the role of, archetypal mothers and fathers themselves. Like it's passing along this sort of ability to come into one's own divinely expressed volition. But of course, the shadow side of the emperor is the tyrant, again, the one who is out of balance, the one who is asserting their will or dominance over everyone else. And so, this idea of like, how can we move forward in, how can we direct our will rightly so that we are going to express the higher octave of this divine father, this divine leader? How do we move away from the tyrant and towards systems, people that are feel responsible for delivering this manifold of possibilities when it comes to meeting the needs of others. Chariot is literal and figurative forward motion. It is uh, making a decision that you wish to accomplish something in the world and taking direct action in order to move towards it. And the implication is that it will come into being. It will be a success. There will be a breakthrough as a result. And again, there's just this emphasis on balance, balancing the light and dark parts of our own psyche, never ignoring the darkness. That's how it comes out in distorted ways. That's how we get these um, uh, malignant parts of our psyche when we deny them, when we suppress them, when we pretend that that's not happening. It it comes out sideways, and it tends to be wildly destructive. We are certainly seeing a lot of that, right? People in denial about what part they're playing in the chaos that's happening out in the world. And, that which resides in the darkness will fester. And, but it's also rich material that can be worked with consciously when we're willing to interface with these dark parts of our own nature. It also becomes the fertilizer for beautiful creations. And when we shine the light of consciousness down into the dark depths of the unconscious, then that is when transformation happens. That's where the alchemy is, right? So again, it's not about either or, it's and both. And how can we come into balance in order to direct our will in ways that is both effective and transformative? And certainly, the archetype of Scorpio is like that which remains hidden in the depths, in the darkness. And how comfortable are we with sitting with that material and examining it, being with it in a loving and compassionate way so that it doesn't overtake us, or, it doesn't destroy us from within. This is something that we're invited to look at in our own lives, look at out how that's playing out in the collective. And then again, always with this intention of finding a balance internally and externally so that we can get our needs met in the best possible way for everybody. So I don't know. I hope that some of that, might make sense to you on a personal level. And I hope that you found that helpful. It's always my intention for doing these readings and putting them out there. I absolutely appreciate those of you who are listening and who react and interact. I very much enjoy that. And I am hoping for you many blessings on this coming full moon. Take care. Much love.